Hello and welcome to DEI Advisors. My name is Lan Elliott on behalf of DEI Advisors. We are an Arizona nonprofit dedicated to empowering personal success. And today's guest advisor is Aik Hong, the founding principal of Greenwood Hospitality Group and also the chief investment officer for Hotel Equities. Really pleased to have him on. Aik Hong, welcome to DEI Advisors.
Good afternoon, Lan. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this for a little while. So, why don't we dive right in? As I mentioned, you founded Green World Hospitality and you recently added another role as CIO of Hotel Equities. So your journey continues to evolve. Could you share a bit the inflection points in your career and if there was one or more factors that you think were instrumental in your success?
Sure. As I reflect back in my 20s, I was actually a junior manager at a property developer in Singapore. And, I was a few years past graduating from college, and I was, to be honest, very confident in myself at that time and believed a lot in my own capabilities and technical skills. And then as I was watching my director, the person I was reporting to, he was really good with working with different people from within the different departments, as well as working with her boss and working with our clients. And I began to realize that she's getting things done, not necessarily because of her technical skills, but it's really her ability to kind of make people comfortable, understanding the goals that we are trying to achieve, and then working together towards it. And I was beginning to realize that, first of all, it takes a whole team to get things done. And more importantly, it's actually all the soft skills, the interpersonal skills. And, my spreadsheets, as good as they are, they don't get things done unless, other folks buy in and work towards that. So that was like, as a junior person in the 20s, it was a big aha moment for me. And then I also then had this opportunity to come into the US when I was in my mid 30s. I was given a really tough assignment at that time. It was just after 9/11, and the Singapore group owned a hotel management company in Denver, Colorado. And it wasn't making money at that time because the industry suffered a downturn. And, Singapore gave me a mandate when I came over. It's basically you have 6 months, fix it or close it. So it was a fairly challenging situation, and I realized that I'm new to the industry. I've never been to the country. Don't really have a network of contacts to lean on. So I actually had to quickly learn about the business. What is the hotel business all about in the US? Who are the different stakeholders and players and so forth? And that was, do a lot. Thank goodness for Google. I could research a lot through that. But more importantly, I had to develop trust with the team that I was coming into. The unfortunate thing is, as part of the restructuring, many of the folks had to be let go. So those who were remaining obviously looked at me and worried about their job security and so forth. So I had to really rebuild the whole team dynamic, try to earn their trust again, try to learn what they, kind of establish a vision for what the company can be so that we can quickly get out of the crisis mode. It's the worst thing possible is forever be in a crisis mode and a sense of siege. So I have to build back that confidence in the group, in the team, and then also have to go around making sure all our clients that I got to get to know them again, establish relationship to make sure that they understand that we are here, we will stay here, and I'm a phone call away if they have a concern or problem. And last but not least, really have to kind of build up my new network of contacts in the whole industry, attending the conferences and leaning on people that I make friends with, and lead. So in a nutshell, I realized that I learned a lot of soft skills. Uh, I was in my 30s. I stumbled around a lot, to be honest, and made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I'm sure folks that have offended people along the way too. And as I reflect back, that's a great learning. Although it was a very challenging time, but it was also one of the steepest learning curves I've ever experienced. So I think as to your question about what are some of the factors that contributed to my success, um, I think from my standpoint, it's really having mentors in my life, people who really took an interest in my career. I'm fortunate enough as I look back in my career, when I first started work and over time, I had bosses that really took a strong interest in me. They they invested in me, they wanted to see my career succeed. Often they give me feedback that I don't want to hear, but I think I need to hear. And as I look back, I say those are the things that, people who love you are the ones who tell you the truth, even though they say they may not, it's not what you want to hear. And that's really been good for me. Also learning how to be more relational. When I mean that is not be transactional in how we relate to people. I mean, no one wants to be seen as a project. No one wants to be sold something. They want to know that you are genuine in your wanting to know who they are as a person. And so I've learned over the years that that's very important. Just as I go by the golden rule, right? I want to be treated the same way as others want to be treated by me. And last but not least, I've learned that being humble, understanding that there's a lot out there I don't know, and there are a lot of great, smart people out there that I need to learn from, and being authentic, right? Being genuine to yourself and to others. I think it shines through very quickly because we all can. I think through over the years we can always detect a fraud from afar. So I try my darnest to be authentic and live to my own principles as best as I can.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great themes you talked about. You touched on mentors and champions, and you talked about navigating new territory as being a really steep learning curve. And you were already a fairly senior executive when you came over. And I didn't realize you had 6 months to figure it out, make or break in 6 months. But can you talk a little bit about coming over here? And you touched on it, but developing a network and being authentic. What's authentic in Singapore is maybe you're still you when you come to the US. But how do you navigate bringing your authentic self when you're in a very different place, a different culture, maybe that has different priorities? How do you bring that authentically? Because that can be really hard. It can really make people want to just try to blend in. And you are so wonderfully yourself. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you navigated that.
Sure. I think first thing is the way I look at it is we I have to understand who my true self is, right? Understanding that these are some of the things that I hold true and very important to myself, the values I hang on to, and honestly, it's my faith as well. I discovered one of the most challenging times is always I got to lean back on my faith, understanding my identity as a person. It's not depending on the outcomes, not depending on performance. So I'm thankful for that. And I have perspective that, to be honest, even if I had failed in my 6 months, that would still not be, how I would be have been defined, right? So that the outcome wasn't the biggest thing that I was worried about. So I think that was starting point, thankfully. Then the second thing is then I say to myself, how do I make people comfortable? How do I get them to hopefully want to know who I am as I want to get to know who they are? So building relationships, and I've been very fortunate, I must say, along the way in different parts of our industry. I mean, we are in the hospitality business, and a lot of folks are genuinely hospitable, and I'm thankful for that. And I think there's a joke in our industry that there's only like 3 degrees of separation, so everybody knows somebody in the industry. So I got to know a few good friends, and then they start introducing me to others, and so that's kind of a beginning to build that network. And I must say though, I pay a lot of conference fees, attended a lot of conferences. The first few were a bit challenging because I was kind of lonely, standing myself in a corner. I think by the third or fourth one, you get to know a few people, and then you build from there. Um, so that helps. Of course, I have to somewhat assimilate. I must understand that the joke I always make is if you talk about the weather, you talk about the sports, you usually can get people talking in America. So I've learned very quickly that those are the at least icebreakers, right? To get people to kind of open up. And then soon you talk about asking them about their families and their children. Everyone has a lot of pride. They love to show you photos of their children and so forth. And it's a good way to get to know someone.
That's great advice. And, the perspective of being, as we said, a senior executive before you came to the US and then coming to the US. And as you said, standing in the corner for your first conference, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but I love the idea that you push through. And as you said, people introduce you to other people. And some of the most incredible contacts I've met have come because someone said, "Oh, you should meet this person."
Yes,
And
so
it's
true.
been really a great way to grow the network to wonderful people, not just more people, right? I wanted to go a little bit deeper into continuous growth because you brought up something earlier that I thought was really interesting. And that was how early you figured out that the relational skills, the soft skills, working with other people to get things done was really important. Because I think a lot of young people, you go to school and you are learning knowledge, you're learning things, technical things, and you come out of school and then you start working and you're again working on technical things. And you
Hmm.
think that what got you here is going to get you there. But I love that very quickly you saw that it wasn't just the technical knowledge that made your boss successful, that she was able to work with other people. And I think it's such an interesting part of this continuous growth. And I'm wondering if there's a lesson that you learned recently, because you strike me as a continuous learner. Is there a recent lesson that might change your leadership or your strategy going forward that you've discovered?
Yes, interesting you asked that because I was recently at a conference and I heard a keynote speaker. His name is Chris Singleton. His title of his talk was really the story behind the stands. And I don't know whether many of your listeners are aware of who Chris Singleton is. His mom and his 8 other people were shot and killed in at a church in Charleston, 2015, when he was in high school. So he was a minor league pro baseball player when he graduated, but he actually took the pain and the tragedy, and over time he developed it into he found his purpose in sharing a message of resiliency, forgiveness, and unity. And then what is so powerful about it is that he's saying that before you condemn someone's stance or disagree with someone's stance, is please find out what is their story. Find out why do they have such a stance. In the today's world, we're so polarized in our all different viewpoints, whether it's politics or social issues and so forth. It's every time we hear something that we don't agree with, and we're all up in arms and ready to go to fight, go to war over it. I realized that I myself is very quick to judge, especially or dismiss ideas and positions that I don't agree with. And I found that, okay, maybe there's something I can take from what Chris has shared is to perhaps first understand where is the person coming from? Why is that person taking this particular stance or position? And that way, it's like maybe I can understand where it's coming from, and hopefully he can understand where I'm coming from. And there may be some interaction to maybe leading to a better idea, a better solution, rather than always thinking that I know everything first, and then that person knows nothing, and therefore I would should always prevail. Especially in the case where I am the leader of the team, and people will obviously defer to my position. And I'm very concerned that sometimes my position is completely wrong and I can lead us down a very bad path, you know. So as I'm learning, and it's more about leadership, it's about motivating others towards a common goal. So really, I really wanted to get to know the person, get to understand why they believe in a certain way, and and perhaps that's the beginning of a better relationship. So as if you ask me continuous growth, I'm really trying to always understand the story behind the stand.
That is such a beautiful skill to develop. And I agree. I think there's so many times, especially today, that we assume if we disagree with someone, they must not understand or they're just wrong. And I do think if you hear people's stories and you hear the why behind how they came to that idea, you can really start to see things. And I also love the idea that it might lead you down maybe certain different decisions or maybe different things to consider that hadn't been part of your original pool of things you put into a decision that you might have made. So wonderful. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about taking risks because you've already talked about a number of risks that you've taken, but you don't get to where you are without taking risks. And I'm curious, how do you how do you think about that? How do you mentally take a chance on something?
So I guess the biggest risk I took was in 2009. You know, we all remember '09, the global financial crisis. Everyone talks about Lehman Brothers. Um, I started together with a couple of partners, Greenwood Hospitality, in the middle of middle of 2009. At that time, I thought that it was the greatest opportunity to start a business because, there was a complete reset in valuation of real estate, especially hotels. And thankfully, I have a very supportive wife because I went to her and said, I'm going to quit my job and start a company. And then she looked at me and said, you sure? I said, yes, we've saved some money. We're going to make this work. uh, on hindsight, I think I should have started it in 2010 because the first 12 months it was really challenging. Not a whole lot of things happening. Not much, you know, not many deals were taking place. As you know, everyone's frozen. But I learned a lot from the standpoint. There were a lot of roadblocks, a lot of both financial, business, and everything. And over those times of difficulties, I started to lean on, obviously again my faith and my family and my friends who are there to encourage me, who are there to basically say, "Hey, you can do this, and we are here. You can always lean on us." And there was at times I felt that I've kind of bring financial ruin to my family. Things weren't going well, and it's like, why did I just do that? But it was really resiliency, perseverance that I've got to dig deep and learn from it. And as I said, when I was doing the 6 month thing that I shared, outcome wasn't really what I was too worried about. Just keep working the process, keep on being alert to change opportunities, willing to pivot as necessary. Whatever, honestly, as they say, whatever business plan I drew up within 6 months is actually not valid. Gotta start all over again. So learning to be resilient, learning to be persevere through, and I think in the end we make our own luck, so to speak. You know, as we see opportunities as they come, and it was actually very fortunate. Our first breakthrough was being able to acquire a Ritz-Carlton in Dearborn, Michigan, and convert it into an autograph, the eighth autograph in the system. And that hotel is still within our portfolio today. It's been really a very, very successful hotel for us and basically established us in the um, soft branded space. We are one of the top management companies within the Marriott system for soft brands, and all thanks to that hotel. And frankly, it was, as I look back, some of the reasons how we got to acquiring the hotels, I consider it divine intervention. It's not just myself alone, but it was many things that came together. they allowed us to actually be involved in that project. And it's a gift that has keep on giving, and I'm very thankful for that.
I love the idea of resiliency. I think we all learned that living through the recession. And you don't have to be in hospitality very long to understand that it's a very cyclical business. But I think that was a bit deeper than what we had expected. And I don't know if it prepared us for the pandemic, but it was definitely a skill that we had to learn. And I also love the preparation because you looked at when you started your company, you had built up a nest egg. You knew that there was a little bit of financial security to step off that ledge and away from your corporate job. And also
Mm.
recognizing an opportunity, which I think you saw like this is a moment in time that that may not come back around again. So good for you for taking that risk. Now,
Thank you.
sometimes when you take a risk, it doesn't turn out the way you hope. But people have said that often you learn more from the setbacks than you learn from the successes. And I'm curious if there's a setback that you had that taught you a valuable lesson going forward.
Oh, absolutely. I have many, too many examples to share, but I was to talk about one particular one. Um, I was about 30 years old. I was actually a CFO of an infrastructure company in Singapore. Uh, Honestly, up to that point, my career was really one smooth trajectory. Been very successful, very good at what I was doing. And then the Asian financial crisis happened in 1997. And all of a sudden, our company had loan covenant issues and we had liquidity crisis. Immediately, all the loans were being called back. As you know, when you're the number one finance person in the company, also know the banks are knocking on the door and say, "Hey, pay me back." It was the first time, honestly, in my career at that time in my life that I really had a major crisis and not knowing what to do. I was actually paralyzed at times and figuring out how am I supposed to pay back hundreds of millions of dollars overnight when there's none to pay? So it was actually at that time that I kind of discovered my faith and I kind of leaned back on my family and my friends and begin to realize that, work and life, both cannot be separated. It has to come together. And, there's a whole person, right? Whether it's the body, mind, soul, as we all say, and it has to be taken care of. And that was the beginning of me saying that, okay, just keep working, keep doing the process. But, this is where you have to be resilient. You have to persevere. And it was, big blow to my ego. I always thought that I can solve every problem that people, things thrown at me up to that point in time. And, learning humility, learning that you really can't do it all by yourself. Um, so that was, what should I say, looking back, it was the best thing that happened to me. It put me down to a point where I says, okay, you're not that good, number one. Number two, you really need God, need your family, and also need to take care of yourself as a person. Because I was becoming, at that point in time, arrogant and hard to live with. My wife would say those are the few years that I was, in my late 20s, early 30s. I was, I was riding high. You know, I could, I didn't even take good care of those people that I went to school with because I think they were not worthy of my time. That was how a nasty person I was. So I was glad that you know, kind of God hit me with a 2x4, and then I kind of learned to be a good human being again. So
Yeah.
hopefully that I don't wish it on anyone.
Well, life does have a way of bringing you back down to earth over time. And hopefully that moment in time was not all of us in order to bring you humility. But I do think it brought a lot of humbleness to a lot of us to be able
Yes.
to say, okay, it's not going to keep going up. Our career doesn't necessarily go in one direction the entire time.
Yeah.
And I love that you were able to then learn the value of leaning on your family and your friends and your faith in order to center you, because that's so important when things don't go the way you hoped. And the message that your whole life is not your job and the outcome isn't who you are,
Right.
I think that's really valuable. Thank you. One of the things that I know you do a lot is build high performing teams. I know, especially when you take over new hotels, very quickly you need to build a high performing team. And while a lot of leaders get really good at building teams, most people get to build a team and work with that team for a period of time. But you actually have to build multiple teams as you bring on new hotels and then hope that that leader will then go off and do a great job so you can turn to the next thing. And I'm curious, how do you approach building these teams? Either when you're doing it from scratch or when you're inheriting a team and maybe making adjustments. What do you think about? What are you looking for when you're interviewing people to build a team?
I think the first thing is, in building any team, trust is the foundation of everything, um, because that's the glue that brings it together. So as a leader, you got to focus on building up trust. Number one, your team members need to know that you have their back. You will always be there to support them. Um, I often joke with my teams. I say, my what's my job description? They all look at me and I say it's COR, Chief Obstacle Removal. So I look at it as my job is to remove obstacles so that they can be successful, whether it's a policy, whether it's a process, whether it's some circumstances that I may have to go speak with some people, like the clients and so forth, so that we can get the resources and tools in order to be successful. If you show and demonstrate that you really care for them and continuously are trying to help them be successful, you can begin to build trust. And I think the key to trust is, and we all understand trust means you will keep your word, but I think I have another definition for trust. Trust also means we trust in each other to want to achieve what's best for the team as well as themselves. So that's important because when someone says something, and that's again back to I may not agree with that person, but I know where that person is coming from. They want the best for me. So I think that kind of level of trust, if it's built and achieved, the team will be high functioning. Because the rest of it kind of can be worked out. You know, once they all understand, and then of course my role as the leader is to articulate a vision or a goal for the whole team, where we're going, right? So that they can then understand that, okay, this is the direction we're heading, and then the details can be worked out collectively to move towards it. So I would say trust and a clear vision of where we're heading directionally are two key ingredients. And then third, I will go back again, is building up relationship, which is related to trust. Um, because every one of us think differently, and that's actually a good thing. We complement each other. And as the leader, I also have to be prepared to make hard decisions. Because honestly, sometimes certain members, either we inherited or new, may not fit the team. And it can be detrimental to the performance of the team. And as the leader, back to my COR role, I have to make the hard decision, may have to make a hard decision removing that person. As far as the interview, when I look at who I mean, what I look at when I try to interview people is the attitude, whether that someone's positive, and then more importantly, can they handle adversity? Because to me, we will have adversity in our life. That's like a given. How we handle it and how we deal with situations that arise tells me the maturity of that person and the what's that person made of. And I mean I know this quote is not made by Winston Churchill, but I think it was attributed to him. He said something about people and tea bags are the same. You know their flavor when you put them in hot water.
That is a great quote. And yeah, I think that's true. What you're looking for is how are those people going to react when things go sideways, and looking for positivity and looking for resilience. I think it comes back a little bit. But also I think the positive piece, right? Because generally it's better if you work with people who believe they can find a way, or
Yep.
if it's not going to work, are okay, they understand that, fail fast, move on,
Hmm.
and pivot, go do something else. But I think those are really great qualities, and building trust, I think that's the beginning of everything on teams for me.
Yes.
Yeah. Akon, you shared a lot of really great advice with our audience. What advice would you offer to your younger self, 22-year-old Akon? What would you want him to know?
Well, uh, for sure, as I think we touched on it, number one is just don't just focus on technical skills. It's the whole developing relationship part. It's so important. And part of the building relationship is learning to be humble. I recognizing that, yeah, honestly, as a 22-year-old, you really don't know a whole lot of things. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of wisdom out there to gain from. And being humble allows me actually to go learn it and get it from others. And then the last thing I would also tell myself is always remember the golden rule: treat others as you would like them to treat you, and make sure, and don't look at someone based on their title and their position and so forth, because in our line of work we have housekeepers, we have general managers, we have owners, we have capital partners. um, Make sure I always try to make sure I treat every one of them equally important, because they are valued by everyone, especially their family.
I love that. Thank you. Well, Akon, we are coming to the end of our conversation, and I'm wondering if you have one last nugget of advice for our audience. Keeping in mind our mission is empowering personal success, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling to advance their career?
I'll say this. Uh, Maybe it's a common theme for me. Experiencing failure is inevitable, and failure can be a great teacher. I actually learned more from failures than my success over the years. So I was, uh, you know, the audience, that do not be too down on yourself. In my faith, everyone is a beloved child of God, and each person is worthy. And personally, I rest on that identity and not let setbacks define who I am. I draw strength from my family, my faith, and those around me. And I've been reading this John Peterson's book on the 12 rules of life. I don't know whether you're familiar with that. And I just recently finished rule number 3. It says, make friends with people who want the best for you. So I would encourage everyone to be very intentional in developing relationships and a community that loves you for who you are. The journey to success doesn't have to be walked alone. So I would say surround yourself with those people that want the best for you, and lean on them and get encouragement, especially during challenging times. And then as you can tell, I love Winston Churchill. I'm going to quote it, one more quote. It says, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So stay strong, be resilient, set goals, and work towards them.
Wonderful. Akon, that was a wonderful place to end. Thank you so much for your time and your wonderful wisdom and sharing that with our audience.
Thank you. It was enjoyable today.
Thank you. And for our audience, if you've enjoyed this interview with Akon, I hope you'll go to our website, deiadvisors.org, where you can find many more interviews with hospitality industry leaders.